Welcome to this version of the database team weekly meeting. It is December 8th, and there are a couple items in there not verbalized. Let everybody read up on. A couple follow-up items. Looks like Giannis took care of the first one, or actually, there's a note in the issue for talking about setting up servers for testing with production data, and I commented on as well. Jose asked a question this morning about data access, and I clarified that we're only looking for data access for people that have it for now, and that our long-term plans at the moment don't include granting all developers access to production data. So we'll see what direction that goes. Giannis, do you have anything you want to add to that one?
No, you covered me.
Okay. I can't remember exactly what the specific follow-up on this one is, other than just keeping an eye on it. So there's a question out there about whether or not we should upgrade to Postgres 12. I think we should. I think Giannis and others have covered the reasons well. I haven't followed it in the last couple of days. I don't know if there's any decisions have been made or not, but I know the concern is around the no downtime upgrade. I'm not sure that we can ever avoid that with database upgrades. I know they're working towards it, but I'd rather us not get behind again. And I don't have any other solid justification other than what's already been written in the notes. So if anybody has any good feedback on that, I would recommend jumping in and adding their feedback to the notes.
Yeah.
There are certainly performance improvements that we could take advantage of with Postgres 12. And I know the container registry built their partitioning with PG12 in mind. So it would be a setback if we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is, I spoke to Josh, and I think at the end of the day, maybe this is a case of making a table with the pros and cons and saying, if we do this, this is what we get out of it, but this is the impact to our customers. If we don't do this, this is what we'll miss out in the next year, essentially, because we can't guarantee that. And I think it's also, I think Yannis, maybe we talked about it. I'm not sure, I can't quite remember. It's like, I think one of the main risks here is that if people are not upgrading because of this, and they fall like further behind, that will generate a lot of issues for us, because then you're dealing with year-old installations, and that's really hard to support. And we won't actually be able to help them much, because whatever we do now, we can also only backport for 2 versions, I believe. So, it's going to be one of those things where then you have to do patch releases, and I've done that for a few customers, and that is not fun.
Yeah. All right. So, and then this list below, the next items were things that came up last week, and I just started throwing them into our agenda as they came up. So this one is all about the Epic creation failing, but I think we have a good handle on where that is right now. And Jan is working on a fix right now to disable those quick actions. So hopefully our ability to create and close epics will come back to us here today. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Is there anybody who wants to add anything else to that, or just move on to the next one?
Are we still considering the load balancer problem as a priority? Because that certainly is a problem consistency-wise, even though it wasn't the root cause of the epics problem, right?
Right. Go ahead, Fabian.
Oh, so I just saw the comment from Heinrich. And he essentially said, even though this is not the root cause, so maybe we should handle the root cause first, but then I do think that the other issues should maybe come after that, right? Because I think we discussed that, or with Yannis as well, that this may still bite us in a couple of months for a different data type, right? And then we're going to do the same thing again. So that's my 2 cents, but I'm not quite sure what complexity is involved.
How much is this an edge case problem, or is this a persistent problem? Or do we know enough yet to know how persistent that problem is?
From what I can understand, it depends on how the models are built and the hooks there. So depending on how the model uses after and before saves, etc., it is more prone to those types of errors. I don't know if you agree, Andreas.
Yeah, and it's kind of a timing problem, I think, or it can be a timing problem as well. Like if things take long and you get into a database timeout, then you hit that scenario. I think that was the example that was given. Or it's hard to say how often that even happens.
Okay. The good news is that we now know that the problem is not with the load balancer per se, at least how often we see the problem with epics. So there is the fix for the epics. And so I assume that this is not anymore a priority one. It is something that we have to address, but and it could come back and bite us at some point. But so there is the problem now. There is the issue for the load balancer. There is another issue which is pretty vague from my point of view. Still, I have to think about it. Andreas may know more on the way we generate IIDs and how we could help with preventing some of those problems. So there is a new issue created.
Yeah, I think it's this one, right?
Yeah, but yeah, at least I have to think about it. Maybe Andreas can help me with that.
So it sounds like for the automatic retries may leak, that one needs to be reassessed for priority and severity. Does that sound right? Is that something Fabiana or Giannis you want to take on?
I think Giannis is better positioned to do that than me. So.
Okay.
We will sync with Andreas and yeah, by Thursday we will have an.
Okay. Yeah, because that could let us know when and where we need to prioritize that work. There was, okay, unless there's anything else on those, moving on to the next one. So there was a request to optimize the events table. Get some help with this. I don't know if anybody has taken a look at this, but I told them we would discuss and figure out how we can prioritize. Might need to go through the RICE framework again and figure out where it falls on our ever-growing list of priorities. Andreas, it looks like you did respond to this at some point in time.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I think it's around the contributions calendar feature, if I remember that correctly. So basically on your profile, you have the calendar, and this goes back to using all the data from this events table, which is rather large. And what I remember from that discussion is that we sort of suggested that we can also improve the way the data is stored for the contributions calendar and not try to sort of crunch all those events at a time when you load the calendar. And the question back then was, this is owned by a backend team, obviously. And I think what we didn't follow up with up until now is how we would organize such an effort where there is a database kind of topic, modeling topic, or making those choices, and then there is also the team that owns that. And I don't know what the priority of that is for the backend team either. In the best case, I think they will be driving that and sort of asking for help on that or for suggestions, perhaps.
Sounds
So
like
I think maybe here a question is also to understand what kind of priority this is for the team that's actually asking, right? Is this a thing where they're like, oh, this would be great, but we don't really care as much, or if it's really critical to them?
Yeah, right. It doesn't make sense for us to jump on something that is not a priority for the other team,
yes.
Right?
I think that this is the perfect use case for working with a feature team on investigating whether we can use partitioning or other solutions And this is one of those cases where the feature team should drive that, and we should help them identify whether the solution that they want is partitioning or another solution. But for sure, and I think that's where we left it with Andreas a month ago, was more like, can we sync with you and figure out what are the available solutions for you? So maybe here as a follow-up, yeah, to reach out to them and sync with them and have a discussion.
All right. I'm going to throw it back to product management for that. Fabian or Giannis, one of you want to reach out to him?
Giannis and I can do it. You can put me on it or us.
Right. Got it. All right, moving on to the next one. So this was brought up by Matthias. I don't know if anybody's read this one.
For me, there was a bit of confusion that has been clarified in the comments below. So this is not about removing Postgres exporter. It's only about the GitLab exporter, which sort of has this like specific monitoring for GitLab itself. And we're going to keep Postgres exporter. And then to add to the confusion, there is a cookbook that we're using for GitLab.com that's called GitLab exporters, which is going to stay around because that's also configuring Postgres exporter. So that was confusing for me to see, but yeah, it's only about the GitLab exporter.
To add to the confusion, so this blocks dropping GitLab exporter, but I think the memory team has this scheduled for 14.0, so 13.8 is fine. Does this still make sense? Is this something we're going to need to do, Andreas? I don't understand this issue enough to know.
I can really only talk about the bloat metrics. That is something we added a while back, which basically feeds a dashboard for us to monitor the database bloat. That shouldn't go away, so we should try to keep that. Perhaps that is also something for the infrastructure team to advise on where we would put that. I don't know.
I think my question, I mean, this is one of these, I think, typical situations where your priorities are not my priorities, right? As in, my understanding is the memory team would like to ultimately drop GitLab exporter because that results in a significant memory savings, and plus it is kind of stale and, you know, we have a different solution. But if I understand correctly, in order to achieve that goal, there's a rather lengthy list of metrics that are still using this, let's say, legacy system, right? And, you know, those need to be moved. And I think the question for us as the database team, and probably for others as well, is that something that we can reasonably do because we know how to actually move things around, or is that some form of dark art and Matthias needs to, from the memory side, essentially needs to take that on himself and go down that dark hole, you know, to achieve his goals. And I don't know enough at the moment to understand that, but my gut feeling is if there's let's say 10 groups, right, who all have to do this, it's going to be challenging because everybody will say, well, I don't particularly care about the GitLab exporter. It does what it's supposed to do for me, right? Just for some color and context.
What wasn't totally clear to me is where what the goal, or it's clear we want to remove the GitLab exporter, but it wasn't clear where we wanted to those metrics to live after that.
Yes.
So that would be something which would help, I think, figuring that out for those metrics. For the bloat, for example, if I look at the reindexing feature that we're doing right now, we also have the bloat information available in the application soon. So it should be relatively simple to turn that around and export those metrics from the application itself. If that makes sense, but that should be something we can also do. I don't know exactly about those other metrics. I think we have them for a long time. So database rows counts something on tables. I have never seen a good use of that, but I could have just missed that as well. I don't really know, but it's something that has been around for a long time.
So I think what we probably can offer here is to say, we'll help you investigate this in 13.8, right? But we don't have all the information right now to say, yes, we can do this, or this is exactly how it's going to go. And I think that's maybe some good feedback, initial feedback from Matthias and the memory team in general, to say, like, if we are making an ask, we need to be very crisp on what we expect people to do, so that they can decide if they are able to do it or not.
Okay. Do you want to add a comment to that issue, or you want me to? Either way is fine.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Was the question for me or for Andreas?
For you. We should.
I can add a note and say.
Okay. And then the last one was an update error. So this was, I think this sits somewhere either in database or memory team. They were having some upgrade errors, and it seems to be related to either the Puma workers or the connection threads. And I don't know if anybody has taken a look at the details of this issue or not, if I'm reading it correctly. So they'd originally upgraded and they kept running out of connections. And when they eventually upgraded their connections to 300, I believe it was fixed. They're still figuring out why, even though the documentation guidelines said this was the correct number for them. So I don't know that there's anything actionable other than doing some research at this point in time.
Yeah, to me it seemed like a miscalculation, or us providing wrong numbers on how many connections are required, but we have to check it again. I don't know if Andreas knows more, but yeah, let's check it again.
Okay. Okay. And then I made a comment about the RISE framework. Where should we keep this so we have an actual single source of truth instead of it being buried somewhere in this doc? I know with the memory team, we do have a spreadsheet, and we have now put related stories under an epic. And Fabian, it looks like you are recommending handbook page.
Yeah, so I had an idea, which simultaneously also would mean offloading that responsibility to Yannis. I think the RISE stuff should not necessarily live in the engineering handbook, but I think we should just create a bare bones direction page for a database, because RISE is essentially helping us to prioritize the next few months and what we're going to work on. And that usually goes into the direction page for a category, right? So there's a specific format, but I think we can ignore 80% of that for now. But I think it's a great opportunity to start and say, these are the things that we're working on, and these are the relative priorities, and that is what we expect to happen. And I think that can then be the single source of truth and be updated occasionally to reflect any change. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's a good idea. And I think in coordination with the roadmap that we have out there right now, I think the roadmap is more easily updated, right? Because you just need to update the epic dates. So I think we can get something out there, and quite honestly, it'll help with part of what the next step is. It's the OKR review. And this all wrap up at some point in time as I go through these. So we got database labs rolled out, right? We have the enterprise edition now. We have 6 months on the license, and ultimately leadership would not like to pay for a database lab forever. And the ultimate goal would be for us to create our own in-house solution for being able to provide the thin clones for developers or a private runner to be able to test data migrations regularly, right? I'm concerned with all of the things. I mean, we just talked about all this new work that came into the database team. I'm concerned about the bandwidth of the team, considering we have Giannis spending more time in product management, and we effectively have now Pat and Andreas focused on database development. And we keep getting new work added. Jose is doing a lot of great work with figuring out the load on the production database, which results in a lot of work for the database team to investigate. So having the roadmap, having the direction page, having the RISE framework, having all of those things visible and available for anybody to see will help to raise the awareness of how much work is being put on the database team and how we need to work with back-end feature teams to kind of push the responsibility back to them and ideally justify more headcount for both our team and the infrastructure team. So that was a lot of information there. Any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, so I think from my experience, having a direction page that is stakeholder digestible, as in people who are not very close to this, who can look at it and say, oh, this is what the database team is doing. And also with some disclaimers on there, what we're not able to do. So for example, Geo has the backup and restore category, but I've essentially put a big disclaimer on it that we're not doing anything there because we have no bandwidth. So being transparent there is, I think, quite valuable. And I think also in terms of sort of bandwidth in the team, other than the direction, I think maybe we also need to have a separate discussion on what we can do to scale ourselves further. As in, are there specific things that we can do now that maybe are quite a bit of work, but then in 3 months mean that we can hand out certain things to people, right? And I think we have some ideas there already, and we discussed them. Because if we're not getting additional headcount necessarily, or maybe only very limited, then I think it sounds to me already as if the database team is operationally very busy, right? There are requests for production and bugs and things, and that by itself keeps everybody, already pretty spread. So that's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a similar direction page for Geo?
Oh, I have several. I can show you mine here. I'll copy it into the agenda document if that's okay.
Yep.
So this is essentially 3 direction pages for Geo replication, disaster recovery, and for backup and restore. So if you just click on the Geo replication one. So it doesn't need to be as extensive given, that we're just starting with this, right? But I think it can help provide sort of an overview.
Okay. That's great, thank you. I think not like at the moment super critical, but I think clarifying within the next couple of weeks will help, because again, we had that limited time frame on the database labs license, and I've made it clear that I don't think we'll make any progress on developing a replacement, even thinking about developing a replacement for that, for a couple of months. And if we get to the 3-month mark and we haven't even started thinking about how we would replace that thin cloning functionality with our own, we'll have to start looking at either, is Database Lab providing the value we need there? And if so, a renewal license. And then that will come up for when are we going to have our plan to replace it. So I think this direction page and communicating those priorities is on the scale of getting that out in the next couple weeks, maybe, or well, with the holidays coming up, maybe early January would be the time frame on that. So. All right, and back to quick OKR progress review. Lost the link. So, okay, so we talked about that, allowing developers test against production data. We are where we are, and we are in the process of these other ones too. How do I get that to go away? There it is. All right. I think this is actually the next topic in the agenda, so we'll come back to that. Andres, how are we doing on reindexing? Still making good progress there?
Yeah, still working on that. The latest change is still in review, which took a little bit longer than what we've scheduled for yesterday, but haven't gone through with was a manual reindexing in production, where we basically target the most bloated indexes that Jose identified earlier. I wasn't sure what was missing to get that going, so Brent had a couple of questions about that. So maybe we can do that, and hope is that we learn from that a little bit more. And basically, the last thing to add, which is I'm about to start, is a Grafana annotation, so that we get some visibility into when those things happen, and that should be the basis for us to enable that in production in a basic version, let's say. I think. So okay. Development-wise, maybe that's finishing up before Christmas, and we can think about enabling that in January. That should be good.
Okay. I will update later with progress there. Just taking notes separately, sorry. And then say-do ratio. So I'm still have questions about what the single source of truth on say-do ratio is. So we have a Scisense dashboard for this. So as you can see, for database for 13.6, our say-do ratio was 43%. Does everybody know what say-do ratio means? What's driven off of? It's the number of issues that we marked as deliverable that we delivered within that milestone. Or so that would be for us. Yeah, 43% we delivered in 13.6. And then there is this calculation for a number of reprioritized issues. So typically throughout the milestone, we will move things in and out of the milestone, right? So this is, once we reprioritize everything, we hit 75% of our deliverable issues. But also, according to our retro count, we hit 100% of our deliverable issues. So I think the difference there is in the timing of when these are calculated. So within Scisense, it cuts off at the end of the 17th. It will count the number of deliverable issues shipped. With the retro issue, it doesn't count until the 23rd. So that's the difference in these. So I'm calling us good based off these two numbers. There may be some question on this one, but I can address that if John or Christopher, anybody in the management chain asks about the OKR progress. So that's where we are on that one, and we're making good progress on the other ones. Andreas, you have the next item.
Yeah, not terribly important. We talked about that last time, adding metrics for the integer capacity. And tried to do this last week on the sites, but it hit a permissions issue, so we don't manage database grants really thoroughly. But we're about to sort of get that going, and then we should have those metrics. So that should be done soon.
Okay. Jose.
Hello, everyone. So basically, I'm trying to report here in the Epic the main things that I'm doing. I'm checking for spikes and trying to understand them. I'm basically executing two types of analysis here. One for total calls and total time of resolving the queries. We're finding some candidates for tuning or from that we can talk with our friend in development or with you guys. That's these short-term queries improvements. Some of them, I think, STEM is involved as well, like the set application parameters that is happening on Sidekick. The second is one statement that I think we need to improve and it's executed exactly on the times of the peaks. Our famous discussion about select one and some suggestion about caching. I think as we improved or we implemented some caching lately, no? From a notice from Andreas.
Yeah, that was about the Rails query caching for the load balancer, and that hasn't shipped fully, so that is still behind the feature flag.
Okay.
So hopefully that has a good impact when we enable it.
Yeah. I have found out now a CTE that we have with namespaces that's pretty big. But like it doesn't correlate for me with the spikes that we see sometimes, but seems to be a good point for us to try to improve or reduce the execution times, or let's analyze.
Is that the one that Andrew Newdigate just did the overlay on? Okay.
Now when I did an analysis by myself on the peak time, considering doing the peaks, what is instead of the number of calls, the total time that we have in the pstat statements to resolve the query, and this is the top one. In this peak was the same candidate, so I think it will be a good one for us to become one of these issues.
Okay.
And that query, as far as I could see, it was related to the authorization refresh worker. So that's a background thing that recalculates authorizations. And there was some cross-reference to a large customer that is hitting us with a an automated bot. So I'm not going to say the name, but perhaps you all know what I mean. Do we see some kind of link between that customer and the increase in traffic and load that we observe?
I'm not aware. I cannot answer you that.
Yeah, I think the analysis just came out a few minutes before this meeting, so something to follow up on.
It would be a nice explanation if that, you know, we saw that increase in traffic and load over time over the last few weeks. That correlates back to that bot activity. That might be an interesting lead.
Okay.
I see now what you say is about the amount of traffic to a particular worker, that we can have a saturation in one aspect of the database, right? Interesting.
Yeah, and I just talked to Andrew a bit. He mentioned that this customer, and they have a bot running basically, and that generates a lot of traffic for us. And apparently that can lead to group membership status changing and things like that, which would in turn lead to that worker have to refresh permission and authorizations. So maybe there is something that we can dig into.
That sounds interesting.
In addition to the other leads that you already have, that's a good list.
And the interesting things, like due to the degradation that we see during the peak time, so this one that I'm evaluating, like the total time of execution is getting to set parameter. That in theory is something simple to solve for the database. But due to the degradation, you see that even this is getting slower. Like in the top 10, you have set parameters that shouldn't be there for total time of consumption, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's something to add. That's it from my side.
Do you have a take on what is the sort of the most impressive issue that we would have to look at first if we were to prioritize those?
Well, I think the set parameters, because we are doing random data. And if you sum all the set parameters that we do, because we do plenty of them, so I need one to stop and check how many thousands we do. I think we do even more set parameters than select ones. And we have different values, so we compute a bit more of cost than just a select one. I think this one is top thing to fix. And the second thing that select, we have a huge strange select there, like with union all, with recursive. I don't know the logic why we are doing that. And I see that this is pretty well tuned, but the problem is like the number of executions we have that is really high. And it's always present when we have spikes. So if you tell me two of things that I would like to look, would be that ones first. But just my analysis.
It's good to know. So the select one is not among the
It's
highest
the third,
priority
like,
things. Third, yeah, I would have said that as well. Yeah.
so, and the caching, the other is just ideas to try to move load, or as you said, or like I understood this later, to read from the read-onlys if we can do, because we are like, you see even the total time from queries now, the select from unit for select star from entities is pretty present. Or if we could move this or have a cache in front, or I don't know, what can we do here? Would be great. I'm saying because like my fear is like if we keep with this level of degradation, if we don't manage to do any activity in time, sooner or later we will start to be all of us in an incident call saying why we are having like a performance degradation in a high level, you know? So that's my fear.
Thanks, Jose. Andreas, you have the next one.
Oh yeah, we covered that one.
No, you're
That
right.
is the reindexing the manual one.
I just wanted to reiterate that the 15th is the end of this milestone because of the friends and family date. So top of mind is the audit events deployment, right? That's the first step of audit events deployment. Are we still on track for that one? Probably a question to Pat.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
That reminds me,
Sorry,
do we
ahead,
need
Paul.
a release post item for any of those things? Probably not.
Yeah, I was racking my brain yesterday. I can't think of anything for either memory or database that's release post worthy for this milestone.
Makes my life easier. So.
All right.
Related to that, do you agree that we run a new quick RISE exercise on a Thursday because so that we are prepared for the next milestone? It will also help with the do-say ratio, and it will help with preparing then a kickoff video so that we have set the proper issues, if you agree.
Yep.
Okay.
For now, should we move everything to a spreadsheet? Our current RISE table that we have buried in here somewhere, we can move it to a spreadsheet until we find the final home for it in a handbook.
I could create a similar one like the one that Fabian and the memory team created.
Yep, sounds good. All right, we are at the end of the agenda. Is there anything else we want or need to cover today? I need to fall off here in a couple minutes, but you all can continue, of course.
Not from my side.
All right. Pat, Andreas, nothing?
Nope, should be good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Happy Tuesday.
Bye.
Stay.